Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it.
Welcome, humans of Earth. This is the Human Music Podcast, I think.
Something like that.
And today we are joined by a extremely multifaceted individual, Adam Reifsteck. Adam, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
many air horns over the course of this conversation because this dude's got his hands in every fire that there is. Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, and then maybe just pick one of the projects you're working on and dive into it, and we can kind of expand from there.
Yeah, I guess kind of like the bird's eye view. I guess like my official launch as a professional producer, composer, multifaceted arts entrepreneur, have you. I guess started when I graduated from college, which was in 2005, I guess. I went to Duquesne University, which is in Pittsburgh, and got a bachelor's in music technology, and then went to Western Michigan University for my master's in composition. So it was interesting because I was doing music technology, so the sound recording kind of stuff. And, I didn't really see myself going into audio engineering or going to a studio at that point. So I decided to really focus in on composition and more of the classical music. So I have a classical background, and I was still doing some electronic music as well during college, but really kind of focused on classical music. And then after I graduated there, I moved to New York in about 2008, where I'm still living, based in Manhattan. And so like everybody that kind of musician, it's like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So I picked up and moved and tried to see if I could make it work. So and I quickly learned that it's not that easy. So I quickly learned that I had to get a day job. So I got a day job in arts administration. So I had the composer thing. So the classical stuff, I was working for a nonprofit music organization that did grant for ensembles to do commissioning and work and everything like that. And meanwhile, I'm still hanging out and going to clubs in the underground scene because I was really enjoying, making friends that way. And electronic music was kind of my secret passion, my nightlife, I guess. And I tried DJing a little bit, but I sucked at it. So I never really saw myself as like a DJ. So, I would give my tracks to some of the DJs at the clubs I was going to, and they'd be playing them out. And Bass Saturdays was real big at Webster Hall before they shut that down. So.
Was that Trouble in Bass?
What's that?
Was that Trouble in Bass? Do I have that time period correct? Trouble in Bass?
Yeah, that was around that time as well. Yeah.
Shouts out to Webster Hall. I've been there, man.
Yeah.
My first big event I went to New York was their iStandard Beats to the Beats 2013.
Yeah. So I was running around that time and getting stuff in Basement Saturdays. So like Webster Hall had the main venue, but in the basement they had Basement Saturdays, which was kind of where they did more of the underground kind of stuff and kind of gave more opportunities for emerging producers and DJs. So like I said, I sucked at DJing. So I was like, I did a few gigs at some small clubs, but I was like, yeah, this is not me. So I guess that's kind of where, I kind of was having a conversation with one of my friends at the time, and he said, I was getting some stuff signed to some labels which are now defunct, or either bought by Sony or something, and like the catalog is gone. So that's another issue, we can talk about later. But yeah, so most of some of my early catalogs kind of pretty much gone at this point, but that's okay. You kind of move on from there. But at any rate, so yeah, I guess I started to kind of I said, well, what can I do? I was kind of burned by labels. Some of my friends were having trouble getting signings because they weren't doing kind of like mainstream stuff, especially in New York. In that time, it was like either house or there was an insurgence of, a friend of mine, Reed Speed, who's founder of Play Me Records. She started, the bass house movement there in New York, and then since moved to LA. But so yeah, we were kind of, all that kind of scene was happening on the underground. So you really didn't have, like, the people that kind of didn't really produce that kind of music were kind of left to the wayside. So in terms of labels and that sort of thing. So I said, well, why don't I just start a label? And this was 2015. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I said, it can't be that hard, right? start a label. So, and a part of it was because I wanted to get my music, help my friends get their music on Beatport. Because you couldn't really, at the time, you couldn't get on Beatport unless you had a label. So yeah, that kind of, I wanted to like not screw over artists, and the artists keep the copyright to their music when they're signed with us, and they get a pretty decent size of the royalties, but doesn't make for a very good business model, to be honest. So needless to say, I kind of diversified, and I'm a mastering engineer, artist coach, and I was coaching some of the artists on my label, and then that kind of turned into like a freelance thing, and then also really good at social media marketing, so got hired to do work with a bunch of different performing arts clients coming back from my classical background. So I stay in touch with my classical roots, I guess, in that sense. Yeah. So it's a long-winded kind of very interesting journey.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's start with the label, since that's fresh on your mind. Obviously, it sounds like the onus to start the label was to get your friends' music on there. Were you putting your own music on the label too?
Yeah, I guess the first release of the label was mine, and got some really big press coverage on that, like reviews in the Huffington Post, some big blog coverage on EDM Sauce and EDM.com and all that, big blog. But I didn't see any money from it. All this amazing, all this amazing press coverage, and like no money from the actual release. So that was kind of scary, launching a label and not making any money from the first release. But then, it ended up not being more about the money. It ended up being more about helping artists realize their vision and not get screwed in the end by labels such as I did. And we ended up, I think we're now in 5 years and we've had 300 releases. And
wow.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
Amazing.
And we have tens of millions of plays across streaming platforms and
Holy
stuff.
shit.
But
hey,
that's
sorry,
what happens
I hate to interrupt, but if you don't mind me, just before we get too deep into this, I'm actually really curious. So that first release, what kind of perspective did you gain from that? Like when it came to monetizing, was it that the attention didn't directly like correlate to plays, or was it like actually monetizing the plays, or how did that all come about?
So this is something that I think a lot of producers and artists totally miss is that PR is completely different than marketing. So they think it's kind of one and the same. So like if you get a lot of press coverage, then that's immediately going to translate to sales, and that's just not how it works. It's great for brand awareness and getting your name out and kind of getting that street cred. But if you really want to actually make money, you kind of have to do it on the grassroots level and kind of connect, more with your fans of the, like, especially with the label, since we are kind of, this is another interesting point too of kind of what I learned from launching a label to what I advise people not to do is I love all genres of electronic music. So so Teknofonic is kind of a genre agnostic label, and that just is not how it works these days, you know. I mean, a label, you know, like if you go Monster Cat or if you go to Play Me or, you know, some of these, you know, or Armada or even, you know, like there's specific type of music, and that works very well because then you kind of build a fan base around that. So I think for us, it was, you know, we had to kind of shift and focus more on the actual artist and like help them at a grassroots level, connecting with their fans. And then, you know, and that's where the actual mindset of a marketer, and in my background in marketing kind of came in to help artists kind of see that, because from my mistake going in and saying that's how it's done, you know, you get tons of plays on or placements on blogs and press coverage, and then media will blow up, and it doesn't happen that way.
It does kind of feel like that, though.
Yeah.
You think you're killing it, but then you look at your streaming royalties, you're like, $10.
Yeah.
What the hell? I paid $120 for the artwork. I'm never gonna make that back.
You can't even buy a drink in New York for that.
Right?
Yeah, for real.
Did you ultimately find the way to parlay and leverage that good, you know, press and PR into marketing and monetization?
I think it helps in terms of credibility, but, you know, I think at the end of the day, your fans don't really care about, like, you know, you know, hey, I got, you know, this big review in this publication. They really care about you as the artist and your journey. And, you know, just kind of, and at the end of the day, is your music good too? And they connect with your music. So.
Amen. Yeah. So what ways have you found to connect with fans, you know, on that personal level? Like what have you advised your label artists to do? To, you know, what have you seen work?
Well, you know, I mean, I guess it's being kind of like the social media guru, or kind of just sort of from experience with running the label. Actually, it's where most of our traffic actually has come from. I mean, in probably I'd say so about. I mean, the game with social, it's interesting because Facebook ads and Instagram ads, kind of the game has really changed. The cost is a little higher than what it was. So like when I was running ads for the label in 2015, 2016, we were getting like huge return on investment. Like we would throw up an ad and like that's how we ended up with several top Beatport top 100s. This is just through Facebook ads and targeting the right audience and you know, targeting DJs that want to play some of the club releases that we were doing. So in terms of the actual like artists themselves, you know, I mean, they've kind of focused on you know, reaching out directly with their fans, responding to comments, you know, whenever they're doing that. One of the artists that I worked with, her name's, that's on the label, her name's She's Excited, or she goes by She's Excited, because she's excited about music.
Yeah.
But yeah, her name's Anne, and we did kind of, we did like, she did a cover of David Bowie's, Hello Space Boy, and kind of like her futuristic, like, you know, indie tronica kind of vibe that she does. And so we ran a Facebook ad for that and kind of building up her email list like that. And really the success of it, like, cause she can, whenever she drops a release, she'll have like, you know, you know, a couple thousand on her email list. And then immediately, like, you know, people will go like, you know, check out the release. And then I think that's in terms of Spotify in particular, like the on release day, the more streams that you can get on release day, you know, then the algorithm starts to pick it up. So that's kind of, you know, kind of how we've kind of, you know, made it work in terms of a kind of like a grassroots level, I guess. So.
And so is email list building one of like the pillars of artist development and career development for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, advertising is great. You can find new fans, but once you have them, having a way to be able to talk to them for free instead of paying Facebook a bunch of money to do so.
Exactly. Yeah.
Paying for that one time is always better. And I love how like there's a common thread that you've really invested in the artists as well, in their development, not only from the music side, but also in getting their music heard and getting their music out there. I really think that in today's day and age, that is, for most labels, the value, right? As an artist, you can now get your music on these places by yourself. But what the artist probably still doesn't know is they've spent all their time working on making the music, but they don't know how to connect with fans. They don't know how to effectively use Facebook and Instagram advertising, and they don't necessarily know the best process to go through that. So for someone like yourself to say that you've been focusing on that, I think that's really beneficial. Would you agree with me there that is kind of the value play for a label today, and why an artist would come to you over another label?
I honestly don't think most labels do that. Do what I said, what I do, because most of the labels now are only going to sign you if you already have a built-in fan base. So they already kind of the two things is like with a label is they have their own built-in fan base that you can leverage, that they've been building up over time, and that's where where I would go back to that mistake that I made of like being genre agnostic. Like if you have a certain group of fans that you can that you're building up for one specific genre or subgenre of electronic music, then there's kind of like some momentum that can happen there. But yeah, I guess overall, like I think most labels they're not gonna do the artist development that because they just don't have the money for it, to be honest. And the way I was able, honestly, like the artists that want to really want to take it to the next level and really invest, I actually it's not the label, since we don't have a marketing budget to do that. My artists actually pay for that artist development portion, because I was basically very upfront with them. It's like the label makes no money, so but we can, you're basically paying for my time to really, work with you. So,
but having someone that is in your corner that you trust to help you with that is valuable, and you're going to have to pay for that advertising regardless on your own, right? So having someone that could at least show you how to spend that money effectively, is super valuable.
We spoke a bunch last episode about, or we touched on last episode a bit about the importance of investing in yourself and your career, and, the different ways. If you're short on money, invest more time. If you're short on time, invest more money. But like, what would you say are the most effective places that an artist can spend the money they've saved up to invest in their career?
Not on gear, because as we know, the gear, the better the gear doesn't necessarily make you're going to make better music. So, no, in all honesty, like you kind of hit on a good point, that artists and producers have to be entrepreneurs today. Because, and I hate to say it, but I think what I learned from, in terms of marketing and promotion and business aspect, is not in the music industry, because you're not going to find that in the music industry, because what we learn from the music industry is from the major labels, like that have obscene amount of money to throw at what is like mass advertising, which is basically throw as much money as you can at this artist to get them in the faces of as many people as you can, and then then maybe a handful of those people are going to catch on to it. So as independent artists or up and coming artists, we just don't have that unless you have like a rich uncle or something like that.
Oh, I wish.
So you got to get creative, and that's what really helped me in growing my business and my music, my career in music, which is multifaceted, is just looking outside of the music industry for advice. And my business coach it was interesting, because he started out in audio, and then as a recording engineer, and then realized he could coach other businesses, and that's what he's making his living now. But anyway, so like I would say investing in, either a mentor or a coach that, it can be in the music industry. There's some really, really smart people in the music industry, but, I would at least, maybe try somebody that's outside the music industry that has marketing, or maybe even, take like a marketing course or something like that. So,
totally.
That's a really, I was just gonna say, that's a really interesting perspective, and one that I haven't, in all of my intake of music information, I haven't heard that yet, which I think is really smart. Like, a lot of people just get so insular on music, and there's so many lessons to be learned about business and the world at large. The one specific example for my life that's kind of a tangent but parallel is so in mountain biking, I raced downhill mountain bikes for like 12 years. That was kind of my thing before music. All of the best mountain bike technology was just like trickle down from the dirt bike world, which had all of the money spent in it. So like all the best suspension components and all that stuff was eventually just like the mountain bike guys figuring out what the dirt bike guys did, who had the money, right? So to like kind of pivot that, like, who has more money that has figured out how to market super fucking well? Like the rest of the business industry, the music industry doesn't necessarily have that same pull. Exactly. So I love that. I love that perspective to look at that kind of, who's doing it better in a separate way and applying that to this industry.
Well, because I think, because I think you kind of have to, you can approach it one of two ways. You could be, like you're the product, like, Martin Garrix with Spinnin', or, so countless artists that have kind of blown up that kind of, they're marketed as like an actual product. So you could be either the product or you could be the business owner. So, so I think that's super important. And unless you get in with the right people at the right time, or get a manager that's super passionate about who you are, and then you can blow up like Kygo. You know what I mean? So it's like you kind of have to either search for the right connections or do it yourself. So I think the vast majority of us, like the 99% of us, are kind of stuck in the do it yourself world, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm just not lucky, like at all. Like I know all the right people in this industry, but for some reason it just, I started getting work when I wasn't looking for it. So So
I wanted to ask, so you were talking about you guys, I've done 300 releases and it's been 5 years in the making.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to pick favorites necessarily, but are there any like very like memorable releases where you had a breakthrough on some sort of like realization, or just, for any other reason was like particularly memorable that gave you insight?
Yeah. Well, so there's this one that I signed this electronic band, I guess. So they're a band in the sense of they have a bass player, electronics, and live drums, and they kind of do like this kind of Tron type performance
What's their
where
name?
they kind of 3 Logit. They've since disbanded. 3 and then Logit, and they've since disbanded because the lead singer had a baby, so that's kind of unfortunate. But they're based out of the Czech Republic, and so but they were getting huge amounts of like, I mean, it's kind of like drum and bass, kind of like Seldwelder, I guess, a little bit, or I don't know, kind of like the cinematic kind of I don't know, Dream Theater or Rage Against Machine meets, I don't know how to describe it. It's like all over the place, but it's like
check
this metalcore kind of, dubstep.
I always think it's so funny that like the electronic band thing always just ends up being drum and bass. Like, what the fuck? Why?
I don't know, but
why?
Because they have a drummer?
I guess. Yeah.
Only one drum beat. It's only with drum beats.
Yeah, but it's
Why?
fun.
There's like this whole genre on Spotify that I've found. It's called like future rock, and it's like, you know, like if Pendulum kept going. There's like a bunch of guys that just do like Cell Dweller, and there's these people named Neutronic, and this guy Soul Extract and stuff.
Yeah.
It's all just drum and bass with rock elements. It's like, does no one do just other drum beats with the same things? I don't get it.
Yeah, I fuck with.
I heard of this guy Rip Kenny that does that.
Yeah, I'm actually not mad. I'm actually not mad. Y'all just like keep doing drum and bass. I'm gonna do the rest of the drum patterns with rock.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so with that experience was interesting because that was when YouTube's algorithm actually was working, and now it's like in the crapper. So I mean, that's how they really seriously blew up on some of those drum and bass channels for us. So so I mean, that was interesting because if you, again, it's just all about timing, especially with social media and kind of staying on top of, you know, the technology and what's happening, I guess.
So people say timing a lot. Like, can you go a bit more in depth on like how can you, once you get a feel for that timing after like 300 releases, how would you approach that now? How would you suggest people approach that to get the timing right?
Well, I think now, you know, it was interesting because there's a interesting like article that went around with Dan Elk kind of spouting that, you know, with this founder CEO of Spotify spouting that, you know, the album is dead and musicians need to, you know, just start making more music. And that's kind of an asshole response, to be honest. I mean, because the more content that's in his system, the more money he makes. But aside from that, he does have kind of like a point. You know, you can't really like release an album like every 3 years or something like that. You kind of, I think the you know, at, you know, being at 300 releases, we just, that's like, you kind of have to keep staying relevant and in front of people. So I think the more, and then being consistent too, right? So like the more you release on a schedule, like, you know, every month I'm going to drop a new single or something like that. I think, you know, for us, it was like every 2 weeks, you know, so it's like people kind of expect that, you know, and then, you know, you kind of have to just keep up with that. So,
yeah, I definitely think that I totally agree with you that like the guy could have said that so much fucking better. Like all he did was fucking piss people off.
Yeah.
But he does kind of have a point. Like, it doesn't, like for most people, an album doesn't really work as well anymore. That being said, I'm still working on an album that I would like to drop eventually, you know, like have a cohesive body of work that's like, this is me. And if you want to listen to 12 songs of me, here you go.
That's for your fans, right? You know,
right?
So
right.
They're expecting that album, so
which is a good point. I mean, like for the super fans, I don't think you can replace an album.
Yep.
But for people who have fans that are checking for your music and have followed you on the streaming network and are on your email list, ready to get that email and immediately click over and start streaming every song and help all the singles get onto Release Radar and other people's Discover Weekly, then you are going to have that fan base already built for that album to make any sense. Like Sam Shoemaker, an artist I work with, we had on last week, you know, said one of his things he would definitely do different, knowing what he knows now, is not start with an album. Yeah. He would have started with a whole bunch of singles, built up the buzz, and then eventually dropped a multi-song project on that audience. And even now that he's got a pretty big audience, he's right where you are. Got every 2 week release schedule. Just focus on, all right, let me get a stack of singles and figure out which one to release next.
Yeah, and to be fair, in the concept of releasing an album, you'll probably have heard half of those songs by the time the album comes out. Like you're gonna be releasing singles, and in today's day and age, you can't just release one single and then an album. Like you're probably gonna trickle out a lot of the good stuff and then save some of the deeper cuts or the gems and contextualize them a little bit differently, like maybe make some separate edits for how they flow together in an album. But yeah, especially if you're starting out, don't start with an album unless you're Linkin Park, which you're not. Don't start with an album.
And Linkin Park had an entire label with all of that money behind them to put out their first major label album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You know, so again, like you said, not looking at what did the major labels do and let me emulate that, even though my situation is 99.9% different, the 1% being that I am attempting to market music.
Right.
You know, funny, I was just going to say, funny anecdote about that first Linkin Park album that changed the face of my music taste forever.
Agreed.
The major label that released
Let's just say what it is.
changed the world. Full on changed the world. Everyone knows those two albums were
absolutely
pure fire. After that, certain people like them, certain people don't. But the first album, the major label actually tried to fuck the whole thing up. They're like, no, I think Joe Hahn, like, I don't think he should scratch on the records. I think he should just wear like a lab coat and a cowboy hat and like stand in the back of the music videos. And then I don't know about like the rapping. Like, Mike, maybe you just like sing double for Chester. Like that, like the label like literally tried to ruin what made Linkin Park cool. And I just think that's such a funny anecdote, because if they took all that shit out, it would never have been what it was.
Didn't like the Beatles get rejected by all the labels too?
Yep.
Shout out to labels.
Yeah, man, labels look at what has worked for them and for other labels just now and be like, okay, let's emulate that. Let's get, X band just got big. Let's get something like X band and put a bunch of money in it and ride that wave and get our money back. Doesn't matter if that's good for the artist's career or if it's going to break ground. They're not really in the business of breaking ground. They're in the business of riding the wave, and they have the money to come in right at the top of the wave. But then, you know, similar to that, they pick that one artist that's like, oh, this is the one we're going to push for this lane. How many other artists that sound like that can we sign and then put on the shelf so that they don't actually come out and ruin our one play?
Yep.
Wow. So what you're saying is, if you actually want to make interesting art, you should sign with someone like Teknofonic Recordings and tell the major label to fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, well, and not just that. I mean, there are still some good ones out there, like Reed's label, Play Me If You're, but if you're doing, you know, but you have to be doing drum and bass. But
well, they put out some mid-tempo records.
Mid-tempo stuff too, yeah. So they have like two labels now. They have Play Me 2, which kind of does some of the more adventurous stuff.
But it's called Play Me 2?
2, like TOO.
Oh, okay. That's probably why I had those.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, to that end, I mean, there are, you know, you just have to find the labels that are run by, honestly, I think it's more unless they're somebody with an ego, if they're run by artists, you know, I think they're, you know, more likely to kind of help you along. You know, so
again, are you the product or are you running the business, right? Like it's the same thing for the label, right? Like if it's a label with money, that's a business, and they're going to look at you like a product. Or, you know, is it all about the art? So speaking of business, kind of transitioning us into one of the other many fires that you have, because I don't want to run out of time to at least put some words into all of them. The Music Producers Alliance. Tell us about kind of the genesis of that, what you guys are all about, and what you've been up to lately with that project.
Yeah, so in terms of all the marketing stuff I was doing with my artists at the label, you know, and kind of coaching them, and also coaching them on the music itself. It kind of dawned up. So I started like a Facebook group initially. I think this was about a year and a half ago. Started a Facebook group where, you know, get other producers could come together and get, you know, share ideas and stuff like that. And also, then it kind of dawned on me like, you know, I should be like trying to host like these conversations, like do webinars or something like that. Cause I didn't want to do a podcast because everybody was doing a podcast 2 years ago.
Yeah, why would you do that shit?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to do, it's not that I wanted to do something different, right? Cause I wanted to be more, something that could be more interactive. So I started like a webinar series where I invite industry people that I knew to talk about the business aspect of things. So those were totally free that we were doing. And I was getting people into the Facebook group so that they could come to the webinars. And then, there was a need in the group to do sort of like production breakdown kind of stuff, see what, some of these professional producers are doing. Cause I think for me, like, so I'm a member of the Audio Engineers Society, and I'm a member of the Society of Composers and Lyricists, but there really wasn't anything, like I was going to all these like, events and seeing all these major composers and engineers, like how they worked. And that was, I got to sit in on a session with basically Bob Brockman, who's Christina Aguilera's vocal guy, so just see how that worked. So it's like, I'm in New York and I get all these amazing opportunities, but most people don't. Like, we're bedroom producers, we're working in our bedroom. So how can I take this online? So I started, a production webinar series over Zoom. So I was hosting this as Teknofonic. So providing, part of these resources that I wish I had, and what my artists were missing when they were coming to my label. So I was, reaching out and kind of wanted to grow it beyond, help other producers that are in kind of the similar situation where, maybe they've went to production school, or, they've been into, with you guys at the Producer Dojo, and like if you're kind of at a certain level and you're ready to like get to the next step. So there's really not a professional association or something like there, like I mentioned, the Audio Engineers Society, but I'm a producer, I'm an audio engineer. I mean, I do mix, but I'm not a mixer. So there really wasn't a place for me. So I decided, it didn't really make sense to have it as part of Teknofonic. And so I decided back in April to split the brand and make it its own official platform. So we have a free community, and then we have a pro membership now, which gets access to all the workshops that we've been doing over the past 2 years. So I think we have maybe 60 hours of workshops now. It's kind of crazy. Wow. In the pro membership. Yeah. So yeah, just kind of that was kind of the precipitous for that, to kind of what is after the music school or after the online production school where you learn, the production process, but then, okay, so now what's next, right? So that's kind of a bridging. I see the Music Producers Alliance being kind of like that bridge between, the education to the professional life, So yeah, so that's kind of how that came about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite takeaways from starting that project, or any breakthroughs that you've seen really resonate with producers from all of the 60 plus hours of webinars that you've been doing?
Yeah, I think it's seeing how, like, so I guess the thing that really bothered me about, some of the, with YouTube tutorials and that kind of stuff, or, and production courses are great for beginners, and YouTube is great for beginners, or just, in general, like how to actually start making good music. But then how does an actual pro do it, right? Yeah. So you don't really get to hang out like in the studio, like I did with hanging out in the studios in New York here, which, well, now nobody can because of COVID, but so we have to do it all online. But yeah, so I mean, like there wasn't really a platform for that. So I decided, why not I just create one? And that was kind of, yeah, it's a huge investment. I don't make any money from it. This is more of a passion project that all the money that we make from the platform goes right back into getting, big name artists and producers to kind of reveal the secrets, or like, you know, because it's like, you know, like some of these YouTube channels on music marketing, it's like, that's not how it works. You know, like talk to somebody that's actually doing it, you know. You know, get the people to actually reveal, you know, the secrets. And if you, and I guess that's kind of my gift too. I have a way of like pressing people to kind of like, okay guys, look, this is this is not how it works. Like you know, getting Rick Barker, Taylor Swift's former manager, to say, you know, don't get a fucking manager. You know?
You seem pretty sociable, yeah?
Yeah. So.
Like you seem pretty sociable with people, yeah? Because I'm noticing, you know, and I think it speaks to why you've been successful. Like, as you're going through your stories and talking about how you start all these things, I'm noticing you get other people involved and you create this social dynamic like around it, and that starts to like create its own gravity and suck more in, you know. And I feel like a lot of people do this, myself included, to an extent where, you know, you're kind of isolated in your bubble, you're trying to grind, you're trying to do your thing, but then you miss that aspect of like, how do I connect this with a group of people, create community around it, and then it just doesn't have that weight.
Yeah. Well, no, I guess because I'm a Libra, so maybe.
Oh yeah, shout out to Libras.
Yeah,
get it.
If you believe in that kind of stuff.
Coming right off of that, you know, the importance of community for music makers, because, you know, so much of what we've touched on has been about the community you've built, the people you've built relationships, and then how you're leveraging that to build more community. Can you touch on like the importance that overall music community is meant to you, and then how you're paying that forward?
Yeah, I mean, a community is everything. I think, you know, being in New York, I don't think I would survive without, you know, community. You know, it's nice that, you know, that I was fortunate enough to be able to move to New York, but not everybody has, or, you know, that opportunity to move to LA or find, you know, an in-person community, that they can connect with. So, you know, I guess as things move forward, you know, with technology, especially Zoom here. So it's the world is getting smaller and smaller. So there's no reason why we can't connect beyond just our own little bubbles. So yeah, and that's
totally. So you mentioned the one of the facets of the Alliance is that you distill the secrets of the pros for people. Do you have any favorite secrets that you've distilled so far, or some common threads that you see the pros doing that most amateurs or hobbyists miss?
Yeah, I think they think like they're, you know, just because they're successful that they're kind of not normal people. You know, these guys are super down to earth. Like we'd had a session with a good friend of mine, Brendan, and he did one of Lana Del Rey's song. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head, but he's like, yeah, I just sort of, you know, threw a reverb on that and it worked. You know, it's like seeing these guys that have multi-platinum records. They're just like us, you know, they're experimenting, you know, trying out things, you know, oh, that didn't work, you know, so like, we'll try this, you know. You know, so I think that's kind of nice to see, you know, that from the professionals that, you know, for people that are aspiring producers or want to do this as a career, is that I think we're all into this together, and, you know, nobody knows everything. So don't feel like you have to know everything there is about production before you even release something, you know? So.
What are your goals currently? What are you trying to move more towards?
Yeah, I mean, most of my free time now is invested in this platform, the Music Producers Alliance. I think eventually, you know, this has been funded solely through, you know, myself, and I have no outside investors. I think eventually I want to, you know, possibly might make sense to become a nonprofit or something similar to the Audio Engineers Society, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Totally.
You know, having to work with a board and all that bullshit. So, so I don't know. I don't know. I guess we'll just kind of see how it grows, and you know, anything that we can be like of a resource to, you know, other producers in the community. I mean, because there's lots of different communities out there. So I think my vision is for, you know, the Producers Alliance to kind of, we don't see others as competition. You know, we all kind of do our own thing, but how can we kind of connect, you know, with each other, and you know, this community over here helps, you know, this specific group of producers, but then this other community does this. So how can we have synergy together? So I think that's why we have a free community component. And then, you know, if you want to go kind of deeper with the mentors that I've assembled from my friends and colleagues, you know, there's certainly that option too, but it's not a requirement, you know, so.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who are interested, how do they join that free component? And then how do they join that deeper component?
Yeah, just go to musicproducersalliance.com. And yeah, just
musicproducersalliance.com. All right.
Yeah. And I'm fortunate I grabbed that domain. Nobody had that domain. I was like,
hell yeah,
that's kind of crazy. Like music producers, you know. I guess that's an interesting point too. It's like alliance is kind of it upsets me in a way in a little bit, like, because I see producers, especially aspiring producers or like in like niche genres, that they're kind of like, you know, cliquish or cultish or something like that, you know, in a way. And it's like come on, we're all making music, you know, and I feel like, you know, we're not competition here. I mean, you can't, you know, we all make different music. So I think there's, you know, just because you're helping somebody get closer to their goals doesn't mean you're getting further away from yours. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of has been always my thing. So
yeah,
sounds like the message is stop trying to be the cool kids, because none of us are cool kids. We're all nerds here. Let's face it and get together and band up.
Absolutely,
they're definitely all nerds. I think that's a really important point too, is that scarcity is kind of an amateur mindset. Like all of the pros don't really buy into that. The ones that are gripping so tightly onto what they believe are secrets to their success are the ones that are probably not there yet, or probably just kind of a little bit insecure about what their situation is, and they think that these tiny little tips and tricks are going to be the difference between them making it over someone else, right? And kind of circling back to some of distilling the pro level secrets, I love that that's kind of a philosophy for you, because when I was just a couple years in the game, I stumbled across Splice, which is now huge. But one of the things that they were starting to do that caught my attention was essentially get project files from big name guys, and then you could download them and look under the hood at these guys' project files. And I was like, holy fuck, I can download a Jaws project? I gotta do that right now. And I downloaded it expecting there to be some monumentous secret hidden inside that project that would catapult me to success. And instead what I found is that no, actually there's nothing special about this project. There's nothing that separates what he's doing from what I could do. But I did distill two things from that specific project file that I do think could help this community in particular, which is the first and most importantly, there wasn't a sound in there that was just unnecessary. It was a very simple project file, but everything in there, instead of like overcomplicating and layering a bunch of shit, like he actually just made the parts that he chose to put in there big, full, interesting to listen to, in the right groove, like actually really dialed in the pieces that were in there and didn't overcomplicate it, right? He had all of the pieces that he needed and none of them that he didn't. But the one little Easter egg that I took from that project that I have since put in every other project that I found kind of interesting is the concept of an ambience layer, So there was like this mountain ambience of like birds and just kind of low level droning outdoor noise that was at the bottom of the project running through the entire thing at like minus 36 dB. And I was like, that is so strange, because you don't hear that. You don't hear that at all. But if you turn it off, the record felt just a little bit more sterile, I think is the word that I would use. And I found that super fascinating. That I guess that is the one thing that I found from that project that is actually kind of a pro level secret. That is, you need a little bit of something in the background, whether it be noise or some sort of ambience or just anything to make it feel like the record was made in a place, or just to have a little bit of warmth, just a little bit. Doesn't need to take over anything. You shouldn't even really hear it, but it really does.
For electronic music, like especially I notice it starts to sound really two-dimensional when you don't incorporate some sense of depth. And the easiest way to get that consistent, ambience in the background is just get a long sample and just, get a bit more extreme with your leveling. Like if your kick hits at -6 and your ambience at -50, like the differences in those volumes gives your ears something to pick up on to tell you like how loud that kick actually is relative to something.
Yeah.
Like I think, a good mindset sort of hack for people that are having trouble with mixing is just remember that mixing is never like, you don't mix one element. You mix one element relative to another element or relative to a group of elements.
Yeah, I heard, actually, just to throw that out there, like we're talking about how that could be used really well in EDM, but that's not, just for EDM genres. Like obviously if you're doing a folk record and every single instrument is a human touching a piece of musical equipment that's actually vibrating air in a room, you're going to get all that room sound. That's why people record in really nice rooms. But like I saw Just Blaze live once, and he was breaking down some of his tracks, and he produced that public service announcement for Jay-Z where he's allow me to reintroduce myself, my name is Hove. And in the intro and the breakdowns of that, he said tucked in there, quieter than you can hear, just like we're talking about, is sound he recorded at a park in Japan. He was just sitting in the park and was like, oh man, just the birds and the breeze and the rustling of the leaves, and just record. And just sat there for a few minutes and tucked that into all the quieter parts of this track. And he said with it, you don't notice it's there. Without it, you immediately notice it's gone.
Yep, huge.
Yeah. I think that for me, at least, if you're struggling to pick what should be in the background, because I know that as soon as I learned that trick, I was like, whoa, okay, but what do I put? I can't just use the same one for each one. For me, it's like a subconscious vibe setting, right? So is it like a dark, ominous track? Like I'm going to go try and find like rolling thunder and rain or something to put in the background. Or is it like a happy summertime song? Like find some birds chirping in the woods, like the mountain ambience, right? So that's kind of my little 2 cents on how to pick that sample. But yeah, any other tips or tricks like that as it specifically relates to an intermediate producer that might pick something else up from all of these many pros you've come in contact with?
Yeah, I guess less is more.
Amen.
Amen.
That's kind of like the recurring theme I found with all these workshops that we've been doing. Is that if you play back your track and you mute one of the tracks and you don't miss it, it shouldn't be there. So
100%. Yeah.
Hey man, I found that when getting shouts to Seth Drake, again, we shout him out a lot. He's taught us so much. He, has this concept of the nugget. Mix the most important 5 sounds first, and then go down the list of importance and tuck in everything that's less important. And I find, I'll have composed everything, and then I'll go into the mixing stage, and often I'll get to the bottom of that list and realize like, oh, these last 3 things don't actually belong in this song. And that is fine. this shit sounds great without them, and be okay doing that. Let things go.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I think also too being open to collaborations too, because we had a workshop with Henry Fong, and he down one of his releases that he just came out on Dim Mak, and he was saying, he said, he actually, had, just sort of like had the bare minimum of it and then handed it off. Like he just was getting stuck and he just handed it off to another producer, and then it ends up, being this huge collab. So, I think I think the interesting takeaway too is like, you don't have to do it all yourself. So being able to reach out and be open with other producers and kind of, collab where you can, and, that's super important. Or even if you suck at mastering, don't master it. Get somebody that knows how to do it, or you're struggling with your mix, send it off to somebody that can mix it for you. So
hey, didn't you say that you master for people? Plug.
Shameless plug there. Yeah, I didn't, not intentional, but
well,
you're totally
it's less shameless when I do it for you.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You're totally right, though. There is like a phase I think most producers go through where they're very precious about doing everything.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in the very like niche, nerdy, sound designy genres. It's like very much a pride thing, I feel. But you realize how many pros don't do it. And it's like, it's very good to know still. I'm not saying people shouldn't learn it, but like, if you're trying to, is your goal to mix and master all your music, or is it to like have a following as an artist and do all these things? Because if you're like working 40, 50, 60 hours a week to pay bills and the artist thing, like you gonna have to give up mixing and mastering and probably sound design too. And like, just get yourself some presets, learn how to tweak them, and like, just write good, meaningful music.
Yeah, and even the pros, like the big artists, like if you look on Spotify, you can see if the metadata is there. Yeah. That's a whole other issue. I could have a whole discussion on that stuff, but if the metadata is there, you can usually see like how many mixers are people that are involved in the project. So
totally.
So it's super important I think at a certain point, I think it's super important, like you said, to learn this stuff, because like I wouldn't be able to communicate with a mix engineer what I want if I didn't know kind of the vision, because you are the producer in a sense. I mean, you're both the artist and the producer of the project. So you kind of need to know, be like the Clive Davis, or totally. That kind of knows kind of how records are put together. So I think that's super important, and in being able to communicate that, but knowing when to let go. And I think that just comes with time. I think probably where I got to the point where I said I could let go of my projects was 7 years into producing. Because you get to that point where it's like, it's a process, and you want to, once you get to that certain level, you're like, I don't really do this. Like I can get somebody else to do it. So.
And there's this one picture I always think of, and it's like this like cartoon, like back and forth meme thing, and the dude like sends the girl a song. He's like, I wrote you the song, baby. And she like replies, she's like, yeah, the snare sounds like ass and there's too much 1K and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like crying in the next picture, whatever. But I love that meme so much, because when you're so deep in the producer world, you like really, really care about these things. And like listeners don't talk like that. And when you take a step back and realize how fucking nerdy it is to be like worrying about this stuff, it's pretty liberating, because then you just focus on like the actual emotion and feeling, the part that actually connects everybody together.
And I think Duke Ellington said it best. There's only two kinds of music. There's either bad music or there's good music.
Man, write good music. And I mean, speaking as people that have all released stuff on labels, tell me, Adam, if this holds true to your label, but on Producer Dojo, we are expected to learn how to mix our records before we get them released on the label. But we don't mix them by ourselves. We mix them by ourselves, and then every draft, first we turn it into Spiderhound, the head of A&R, and he gives us feedback and gets it really close to done. And then it gets passed up the ladder to Ill Gates himself, and he gives us even deeper levels of feedback, and we go through multiple rounds of feedback with him before he's satisfied. And then, even though we have mastered it every single time along the stage to give them a master level project, then we give them a mixed level project and send it to a professional mastering engineer so that the entire project is really dialed and really consistent. So even though you should learn to mix your stuff as well as you can, and you should learn to master it as well as you can, knowing when to get help and when to outsource is not only smart, it's liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel like I believe you said it earlier, Luke. It's like, do you have time or do you have money? Like, if you have time, like, go deep on how to do all this stuff yourself. But if you're short on time, then you're gonna have to pay someone to do it. I do think though that it is a bit of a catch-22, like you said. Like, you kind of have to do it yourself at least enough to know. Because the thing that I always tell people is, like, the best sounding mix you ever do takes the least amount of work. Why is that? Because you started with a well thought out composition. You didn't make any problems for yourself. And if you haven't had the struggle of trying to mix down a record that has those problems in it because you didn't know what they were, you're not going to understand how to avoid those to then hand it to a mix engineer and a mastering engineer that can make your record sound amazing, right? Like, you can take good to great in a mix and then great to amazing in a master. But if you've made a bunch of problems for yourself and the mix is bad, you're not going to get bad to amazing. You're going to have a real issue doing that. So you're right. You do need to know enough and have done it at least enough yourself to get it most of the way there. So yeah, I kind of wanted to run back to a point you made earlier, which is just how dumb it is to make a podcast in today's day and age.
Actually,
let's talk about it.
Actually, it's a great idea. I think it's now is that's the other thing too, which kind of is interesting. I was reading an article too. Is like, people are listening more to podcasts than they are actual music these days, which is a little sad for us.
Really?
But
No kidding.
wow. There was a stat that was with Apple Podcasts and recently where, music was down over podcasts these days, which is kind of sad, but at the same time also presents opportunity, I think, too.
Yeah, naturally.
Is that like minute per minute? Like, because that would make sense, because the podcast is like 1 to 4 hours.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That's like listening to 19 albums or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how they factored that in the percentages or whatever, but
yeah,
that would be interesting to know. But it was, obviously those studies are probably always skewed too, especially the one where like the record industry had like this multi-billion-dollar growth this year from streaming. Yeah, the Sony, Warner, and Universal saw that money, not us. Yeah,
I mean, it is true though that more musicians are making full-time income from streaming now, like, than there used to be, right? So it is kind of an interesting stat. Like, does streaming democratize some of the money making from it a little bit if you're able to, as an independent artist, actually do all of the release tasks efficiently? Can you make more as an independent artist today's day and age? That's another conversation. But on podcasting, you have gotten yourself involved in a little bit of podcasting yourself. In the MFM Speak Out series. If you want to tell us a little bit about your involvement in that, and then kind of talk about, making a podcast yourself or being involved in that, kind of what that's been like. Yeah.
So I'm a member of this music rights advocacy organization called Musicians for Musicians. And the president wanted to start a podcast to kind of be a platform to talk about issues that are affecting musicians and the rights, that, especially one of the main things we've been on talking about now is the issue of COVID and how musicians are adapting. And this mostly we're talking about, when we say musicians, we're talking about live musicians. So this organization has been really interesting to kind of be able to interview other diverse artists that are kind of trying to figure out how to make it work and bring to light some of these issues, like, the streaming royalty rates, like, the devaluation of music, and, how, as artists, we kind of need to claim back some of the ness of the music industry. So yeah, just kind of that's really I was sort of like but like roped into it from the president. He's very persuasive, the president. So yeah. He'll keep hounding you until you go through with something. So
probably how he got to be the president.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you there that sometimes you say yes to something and then you're like, fuck, now I'm just doing this, aren't I?
Yep. Exactly.
God damn it.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you guys are roped into this podcast every week, huh?
Yeah, ha. But it's funny that is an example, because it is true. Luke was like, we should do a podcast, and I was like, and now I actually quite enjoy it. I like talking.
Yeah, same here. I get to do it. Yeah. I'm co-hosting it, so I get to.
Yeah, totally. It's
and
not every week.
So now it's kind of fun. Get to interview interesting people. And,
I noticed one of the latest ones. So you have a very wide variety of guests on that show. It's definitely kind of a cool, eclectic consolidation of a bunch of different artists. But the one that you kind of touched on, musicians navigating pandemic unemployment. It's kind of an interesting topic. Would you mind kind of distilling some of the takeaways from that episode in particular, being a hot button right now?
Yeah, that was actually really interesting and kind of not surprising. I think with music, like, I mean, our government's kind of, I don't have to tell you, is kind of screwed up right now. Just a little. But yeah, that was interesting learning how, as musicians, like, I'm fortunate enough as a, non-performing musician, that I didn't really have to go through that process. But, but like, even as a freelancer, that's interesting. And I totally didn't know this, and I missed the boat on it. But, that's since expired. But as they actually lack, the payment protection program actually was kind of like a grant of like $10,000, or like a loan that you didn't have to pay off, that the government did when this first thing happened. And I said, I don't really, this isn't going to work for me. Why should I bother applying for it? But learning from that podcast was like, damn, I should have done that. I was like, I could have gotten that payment, that even as a freelancer, because I didn't know. I thought, like, I'm a freelancer. I'm not employed. I don't have like a business per se, like an S corp or something, like a business structure that I didn't think as a small business that I was a small business owner as a freelancer, but I am, and so in terms of that, like, also too, I wasn't able to do like the unemployment thing because, as a free, but again, I could have, if I knew how to, like with this guy I interviewed, Keith, he's a Broadway music director. He kind of, was stuck. I mean, like, he's directing on Broadway, so Broadway shut down, so what do you do? So you are unemployed, even though he was, doing other projects, so yeah, that was super interesting to, navigate that. And that now it's all too late. So, I mean, if you wanted to apply for this stuff, the ship has sailed. And, then our government, of course, didn't renew the extra $600 that for unemployment that you're getting. So that's gone. And now you're relying on the state, and that's a whole other thing, not to get political, but yeah, it's super interesting how even this stuff, affects us as musicians. And it's important to, and that's kind of the idea behind the podcast, is like to say, enough is enough. Like we don't have to keep getting screwed over by by society as undervaluing our work as musicians. So,
amen to that.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. One of the other episodes you did for MFM was with Peter Wetzler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was on why you deserve to be paid for your music. Yeah. So
Yeah.
kind of something you touched on now, but if you want to kind of riff on why or what the gist of that episode was about and kind of enlighten some of our newer producers who might not understand the value of the art that they're creating and maybe some tips or tricks to make sure that you get that value.
Yeah. Don't work for free.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. I mean, like, people are, it's interesting because I think people are in the creative field, we're almost kind of like afraid to make money from our music. Like, we don't deserve it or something, or something that we have. I mean, it should be free, but that's a poor man's mindset in a way. It's like, you created it, so you deserve to be paid for it. So same with your time. Like, if you're producing for other people, of course, do I work for free? Yes, in a sense. Like, I'll do favors for friends and stuff like that, but that's different if you're taking on free work and thinking that it's going to get you there. I did that early on in my career, and I can tell you it does not work. I did a lot of free gigs here in the city, and I got super taken advantage of, and it did not get me anywhere. So I think there's this idea that you work for free in the music industry, and then that's how you make it, and that's not true. So yeah, I think just being upfront that you deserve to be paid for your work. So
Amen. And on that note, man, just plug any pluggables you want to plug, and let them know how to get to you so we can make sure you stay employed.
Yeah, well, right now, go to Musicians for no, that's the other organization. You guys can cut that out.
We don't cut anything.
Well, if you want to check out that rights advocacy organization that I'm involved with as a member, it's musiciansformusicians.org. But as far as my own projects, right now it's the musicproducersalliance.com. Go and check that out. Tons of amazing resources to get involved with. And like I said, we have the free membership, but we also have the pro membership that gets you into a little bit more advanced, resources and those workshops and stuff. Yeah, and then just hit me up too. Find me on Facebook and social media. I'm not on Twitter anymore because I don't like Twitter anymore.
It's Twitter.
Yeah, it's Twitter.
I finally started liking Twitter.
Yeah.
Meh.
Yeah. But yeah, find me on Facebook and Instagram is probably the best way to get a hold of me. So.
And yeah, if they're interested in your engineering services.
Yeah, for mastering and that sort of stuff. So yeah.
What about if they want to submit a demo to your record label?
Yeah, if you go to teknofonic.com. Now I spell that kind of funky. It's TEKNOFONIC. And but if you type it like techno and then phonic, like hooked on phonics, I'm showing my age now, but
I remember that shit.
Yeah. But yeah, so if I actually have that domain too, so you'll find it, or Google it, you'll find us.
Hey,
So
Sweet.
yeah.
that's how you do it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us on this show. Any last words or words of wisdom for the producers out there trying to level up their game?
Wisdom.
Yeah, just keep going. You gotta keep going. I mean, you're gonna fail a lot of times, but just keep picking yourself up and going. So I can't tell you how many failures I've had over the last 15 years. You just have to keep pushing through it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't understate the importance of that. You're gonna fail. You gotta keep hammering at it. If it's really a passion for you, you just have to keep going. So
For real. Thank you, Adam. That was great. That was
so much.
Such an insightful conversation. I know the people will love it, and it was great. getting everybody together to chat. That was good vibes.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Look forward to the next time. All right, peace out, humans.
Peace among worlds.
Skirt. I like it.
What's up, humans? It's Luke, your friendly neighborhood trap Jesus. Thanks so much for watching the podcast, checking out our videos. We truly appreciate you. So, Rip Kenny, Tesco, and myself got you a gift. We made you a free sample pack. It's got basses, it's got FX, it's got crazy percussion and Foley sounds, and it's free. It's all yours. Just click the link in the description below. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with your friends. We appreciate you. Peace out and peace among worlds.